I watched the Belgian series that the show is based on, and just sort of got to see what they did with, their 10 episodes. I think it was 10. And I was just hooked. I said, there's no way I can't get this part. So then, I talked with Julie a bit about it, and she was like, I think you might be a little young for what it is, and that was sort of how it stood, and I just sort of went in LA in front of her and David, and sort of took off from there. He sort of saw something he liked, and I guess that's sort of all you need, is to have people start to root for you. And then I think the whole process, I went to Warner Brothers and I went to CW and ran the gauntlet, but it was good. No, this guy is so incredibly different from Kai. They're on the spectrum in terms of, good and evil, point blank. Like, that's the most obvious difference. And in terms of introvert versus extrovert, they're just polarizingly different, which is kind of nice. And it was fun because when we shot the pilot, I was shooting that as we were shooting the last 2 episodes of Vampire Diaries. So I'm, showing up at weddings and stabbing siblings in the pregnant stomachs while I'm saving the world as a cop. And this other show is kind of this very sharp contrast, which was fun. That's one of the best parts of the job, is getting to pretend to be people who are so unlike yourself and also unlike the other characters you played. So, I think people will see the differences pretty quickly. They're sort of completely separate humans, which is good. First, when he gets trapped, his first impulse is, I'm number one, I gotta protect me. And that's we sort of see pieces of him in the first few episodes the season starts off. We see that he's got anger problems. And we don't necessarily know where that comes from, but we know that his sort of means of dealing with things is sometimes aggressive. And we start to unravel that story a bit, and we don't ever go back and do a full backstory. Like, we don't know, okay, this is the childhood trauma that caused this in his life. It's not like that. It's just we see the result of this guy's, years on the planet. And that's sort of his obstacle. He gets in his own way. And his story is one of being he doesn't desire the sort of role that's handed to him. He doesn't want to be a hero. He doesn't want to step up and be the one in charge. But he's sort of one of the few law enforcements inside, and he doesn't have much of a choice, with his buddy Lex on the other side sort of running the show and saying, no man, you gotta step up and do this. It sort of puts him in a position where he's gotta fight those inner demons and work through his rage and try to be the good guy. And it's really about humans who are very ordinary, having to deal with these extraordinary circumstances and become something different than what they were before. It's a story of hope, and it's a story of people being put with their backs against the wall with really nowhere to go. And you either sink down and are defeated, or you push forward and you sort of rise above the challenge. And you see these people that we watch, the main characters in the show, are all put in horribly uncomfortable positions, and you see them at war with themselves, and sometimes they lose, and sometimes they take a couple steps back, and sometimes they persevere and they sort of advance and come out of it changed. And that's sort of the theme of the show, is that, which sort of matches the answer to that. Start to see he really has gotten the, excuse my French, the shit end of the stick, and every job that you wouldn't want, he's given. And he's angry about that at first, and he sort of shirks the responsibility and doesn't want to do it. And his whole story is that of seeing if he's able to man up and come to the place where he does the right thing instead of the selfish thing. But yeah, he's sort of, he's the guy. He's trying to wrangle anybody and everybody who has the power inside to enforce any sort of control and keep it from becoming the utter pandemonium that we see in the pilot, and we know that it becomes. We just don't know when. No, that's the best part, I think, is that this show is so, the best and worst part, the show is so real and so, it really shakes us all. We'll have table reads where it's just very emotional, all of this, just even reading the words of what's going to happen in the show. It's a very true story. It's very much about human response, and sometimes compassion, and sometimes heartache, and sometimes selfishness, and it's all things that are very stripped down and raw. And so going from sort of a fantasy world where everything's elevated and you're doing magic and, and people don't die, this is the opposite of that. When you die, you're dead, and you die quickly, and everyone else dies as well around you. So it's sort of, it's nice to have the sort of change into that world. But it's it changes us too as we're working on it, we found, because it really is about these real people, and you end up kind of carrying around pieces of that more than you would for the fantasy show. So the aftermath of that is different, but it's great. It's a lovely experience for all of us. Jake and Jana were sort of a thing first, and that sort of is how Lex met Jana, was through Jake, and they're all great now, and there's no sort of visible animosity about the situation, but when friends date friends, sometimes there's something that you never addressed with it that sort of lives underneath it, and even though everyone's totally cool with it, and Jana and Jake are really close, and obviously Lex and Jake are best friends, and they're in love, that little thing. There's an openness and understanding of that's the situation, but I think it's the kind of thing that informs their friendships in ways, and sometimes maybe things that they didn't deal with when that happened, when Jake and Jana didn't work out, and then Lex was like, hey, I'm gonna date her, is that cool? The things they didn't really talk about or settle might sort of create. So Jake and Jana are both inside and Lex is outside, and and that's a fun sort of story to watch evolve, is those friendships and how they're separated, and how Jake and Jana are the ones inside, and they obviously have this past, but now they're totally just friends. And it does inform the relationships, but that's not like, it's not a love triangle story. It's not a Stelena situation. It's the same thing that happens when the disease breaks out. You sort of see it in every, whether it's World War Z or Walking Dead or any outbreak story, it's about zombies or about a virus. You see people sort of go into this high octane, sort of adrenaline fueled, usually poor decision making state of being that sort of revolves around survival. And it's their state of survival is all the instincts are allowed to take control. So they're not really thinking as much as they are just acting on what feels like the proper choice in order to not die. And inside the cordon, that is exactly what happens. Every single person, once they realize the seriousness of it, and once they realize, oh, I actually can't get out, they're not going to let anybody out. Once they realize they're not going to get out, some of the worst qualities come out of these people, and sort of everyone's moral code goes straight out the window. And everyone's moral code goes straight out the window, and it becomes about how do I stay alive, and how do I keep this thing away from me and my family. And sometimes that involves doing things that people wouldn't do. Sometimes it involves using force or threatening or even killing and violence. And that's a very unique beast to be happening inside this very confined space filled with people who are ill. So Jake sort of is the one on the streets, the one pounding pavement, sort of facing it in the worst possible way every single day. So there's a lot of confrontation moments that happens where he sort of encounters someone who's sick or someone who's at sort of embracing the worst qualities of themselves in a response to the situation. But yeah, he sort of is the one character on the show who's thrown into it the worst, probably. Yeah, we'll see. I'm excited to see how people respond to it, and hopefully we get some engagement from